For 29 years after World War II ended, one soldier kept fighting it. The war was over. Japan had surrendered. The world had moved on, rebuilt its cities, buried its dead. And on a small island in the Philippines, a man in a tattered uniform was still crawling through the jungle, still following orders, still convinced the war raged on. When they finally reached him, he did not believe them. But the real story is even stranger than that. His name was Hiroo Onoda. In late 1944, he was a young intelligence officer in the Imperial Japanese Army, sent to a small island called Lubang. His orders would define the rest of his life: wage guerrilla warfare, survive at all costs, and above all, never surrender and never take your own life. Whatever happens, hold out until we come back for you. He took that order literally, completely. In February 1945, American forces landed on Lubang and overwhelmed the Japanese there. Most were killed or captured. But Onoda took to the mountains with 3 other men. And there, in the jungle, they simply kept going. When the fighting stopped, they assumed it was a lull or a trick. They had been told to hold out, so they held out. Then the war ended, but no one could tell them. Leaflets were dropped into the jungle announcing that Japan had surrendered. Onoda and his men read them and did not believe them. To a soldier trained in intelligence, told to expect enemy deception, a leaflet claiming the war was over looked exactly like propaganda, a trap. So they stayed hidden and kept fighting a war that no longer existed. For years, they lived like ghosts. They ate coconuts, bananas, and the occasional stolen cow, patched their uniforms with bark and thread, and kept their rifles working through decades of jungle rot with palm oil and animal fat. They moved constantly, building shelters and standing guard behind enemy lines in their minds. They even carried out attacks, exchanging fire with police and islanders they believed to be enemy soldiers. And one by one, the others fell away. One man walked out and surrendered in 1950. Another was shot dead in 1954. And in 1972, the last of Onoda's companions, a soldier named Kozuka, was killed in a shootout with police, still fighting, 27 years after the war had ended. Now Onoda was alone, one man on one island, holding a war the rest of the world had forgotten. Search parties came, family came. Nothing worked. Over the years, Japan sent expeditions to find him. His own brother reportedly called out through loudspeakers in the jungle. Photos of his family were left for him. But Onoda saw it all as an elaborate enemy trick. Why would his real family be here unless the enemy had captured them as bait? Every attempt to save him only confirmed how desperate the enemy was to flush him out. Then, in 1974, a young man walked into the jungle alone. His name was Norio Suzuki, a Japanese adventurer who had set out, half-jokingly, to find 3 things: Onoda, a wild panda, and a legendary snowman. He found Onoda first. He camped in the jungle and waited, and eventually the old soldier appeared. The 2 men talked and grew friendly, but even then he would not come out. He was still under orders and would not surrender until his commanding officer personally told him the mission was over. So they went and found his commanding officer. The man who had given Onoda his orders in 1944 was, by 1974, an elderly civilian, long retired, working in a bookshop. They flew him to the island. And there, in the jungle, the old man put on his former uniform, stood before Hiroo Onoda, and formally relieved him of duty. He told him the war was over, and ordered him to lay down his arms. Only then did Onoda stop. He handed over his rifle, still in working order, along with 500 rounds of ammunition, his sword, and several hand grenades, all carefully maintained. He had survived 29 years because he was told to hold out until someone came back, and someone finally had. He walked out in 1974 in his tattered army cap, at attention, a soldier to the last. Onoda came home to a Japan he did not recognize. He had left a nation at war and returned to a peaceful, modern, unrecognizable country, treated as a living relic of a vanished age. He struggled to adjust and eventually moved to Brazil to become a rancher. Later, he returned to Japan and ran nature camps teaching children survival skills. He had survived one of the most extraordinary tests of endurance in human history, on the strength of a single order and a refusal to quit. For 29 years after World War II ended, one soldier kept fighting it. And now, you know why. Not because he was mad or lost or forgotten, but because he was given an order and kept it. With a loyalty so total it outlasted the war itself, the empire that gave it, and nearly the man who carried it. If this gripped you, subscribe, and never take an ordinary order for granted again.